The fourth of our series of webinars, and welcome to many of you that are here for the fourth time, some for the third, some for the second, and for those of you that are just joining for the first time, welcome. The series of webinars has been fourfold. One, looking how and why an employees will be dishonest within your organisation. The fact that they have the opportunity, they rationalise their actions, and the motivation is always for financial remuneration. I've yet to see in 21 years any employee being dishonest for charitable and philanthropic reasons. The second webinar, we looked at the risk to your business, both from a financial and from a reputational perspective, but also from a morale and a moral perspective as well. In the third webinar, we looked at how to prevent and disrupt dishonest employees. And in this one, we're going to look at resources that are available to help you detect and investigate them. For those of you that haven't been in the webinars 1, 2, and 3, if you drop me an email, I can send you the recordings of them so that you can bring yourself up to speed. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Dave Kearns. I'm Managing Director of Expert Investigations, which is a commercial and corporate detective investigation agency. And I'm also Dave Kearns in my own right, fighting dishonest employees. I've run expert investigations for 21 years. Prior to that, I was in the police service for 13 and a half, specialising in overt and covert intelligence gathering, and I've done academic studies. And this is where all of what I put out on webinars and presentations fuses together to give you the knowledge across the subject of dishonest employees and the fact of how you must be responsible, mature and realistic in understanding that you have had, or you will have dishonest employees within your organisation. So, as I say, Expert Investigations is a commercial detective investigation agency. We're ISO accredited, and on a daily basis, we are conducting investigations in the commercial workplace regarding the aspect of dishonest employees. Often we are instructed by the legal sector, particularly litigation, employment and fraud lawyers, and it's great to see that we've got a few of our old clients who have logged in here today. And we supply the evidence to ease your burden with whatever the issue that you have. So we look at the types of dishonesty, and we've reiterated these during the previous webinars. We're looking at theft. That is theft of a product. That is theft of a finished product. That might be theft of materials within an organisation to make a product. That might be theft of money from people's wallets, purses, handbags, drawers. We're looking at fraud, so we're looking at white collar, blue collar, tangible, intangible items. So not only just monies, but also of products. So we're looking at procurement fraud, ghost workers, expense claims, the false expense claims. So we're looking at the top of the organisation all the way down. We're also looking at theft of data, which is the growing and the biggest risk at the moment within the commercial sector is the theft of data. And actually data, we'll look at it from a perspective, it's your data. Somebody has left, gone to a competitor, set up their own business, and they've breached their contract in taking that data. But also in organisations now that are holding lots of personal data, it could be a council, it could be a housing association, somebody that's holding lots of data. That data now, it's liquid gold. And the criminal world want that. And I've been on a webinar this morning that I've been listening to, not only about pensions fraud, but about the current state of fraud in the country. And it is always the organised crime gangs are making relationships to get that data. A lot of breach of contract, so that may well be a breach of contract with a franchise agreement or a contract with a supplier. Then we look at other issues which sit more within the civil sector as well, such as long-term false absenteeism, physical injury, mental debilitation, not just the duvet days, the long-term absenteeism that's going on significantly over a longer period of time. We look at drugs in the workplace, that's manufacturing and cultivating drugs, as well as using and selling drugs in the workplace, and also subversive individuals within organisations. So a lot of these issues sit within both sides of the criminal divide, both civilly or criminally. But we will always look to prove everything at Expert Investigations beyond reasonable doubt. The balance of, not on the balance of probabilities. If we prove it beyond reasonable doubt, we put you, the client, in the strongest position possible. Now, a member of the Association of British Investigators, of which I'm not a huge fan of, one of the committee members said that patient common sense and tenacity are the most important qualities about being an investigator. I don't disagree, they are important qualities, but there are two significantly more important facets here. The first one is how you gather, preserve, and present that evidence. Three things. You have to gather your evidence lawfully and correctly. You have to present it. You have to have the continuity of it. Now, the police service have learnt the hard way and continually lose cases throughout the country because that evidence hasn't been gathered, preserved, and presented correctly. And often within the civil arena, that can be corrupted negligently and accidentally by accident, because people don't know how to gather, preserve, and present that evidence. And if you're specifically going to a criminal trial, that becomes intrinsically important, because that is where the defense will look first and foremost. The other most important thing, I think, is understanding the law. Now, we're looking at lots of offences here that are based around the Theft Act and the Fraud Act. Now, the Theft Act is a huge piece of legislation. I can tell you from my days when I went to detective training school, a significant amount of case law is based around the Theft and the Fraud Act. Now, if you don't understand that legislation, you don't understand what we call the points to prove. They're the points to prove the commission of the offence. If you take the Theft Act, the criminal definition is, and there's 7 points, a dishonest appropriation of property with the intention of permanently depriving the owner. If you don't prove all 7 ingredients of that offence, then you will not prove your case. The same with the Fraud Act. There are specific definitions, and you have to prove all of those points to prove. Now, clearly, in the criminal side, it's on the beyond reasonable doubt. On the civil side, it's the balance of probability, so 49%, 51%. But even when you're looking at other offences, so subversive individuals in the workplace, you only need to understand the Criminal Damage Act. If you are looking at harassment and bullying in the workplace under criminal law, you need to understand, believe it or not, the Public Order Act, because that is based around harassment. Certain elements are based around harassment. The Protection of Harassment Act. If you're looking at drugs in the workplace, you need to understand the Misuse of Drugs Act. And it's also understanding those points to prove of what you need to prove for a civil offence. So, false absenteeism. Are you proving that actually the injury they have got, or that they are claiming to have, that you are proving the points to show that there is no potential defence? They may say they have a bad back and limited movement, but are you proving sufficient evidence to show that it's false? The same with stress or mental debilitation. You have got to prove what they say they cannot do. Prove what is documented, prove the variance of what is documented on their sick records and their meetings with you, and prove the contrary. So whilst patience, common sense, and tenacity are important, gathering, preserving, presenting evidence and understanding the points to prove are the most important. The reality is, for any of you considering using an investigator, is that it's an unlicensed and unregulated industry. So any of you watching can start as an investigator tomorrow. You don't have to have any skills. There's nobody vetting you, looking out that you're following things correctly, lawfully, and procedurally right. You can even operate in this country with a criminal record. Less than 21% of investigators have professional indemnity insurance, and even less are GDPR compliant. So if you are passing information on, you need to be passing information on to somebody that has got a GDPR route map, and I would suggest insurance. The investigation industry is an associated model. If you are based in Birmingham and you have an issue in Newcastle, you may phone an investigator in Birmingham. They will subcontract that work out in Newcastle to somebody who they don't even know. So again, your GDPR compliance actually becomes significantly more important, because this work could be going to somebody without no route map of where that information is going, that personal information is going. And then, of course, you don't know who has got control of your data, who is doing your investigation, and whether they are doing it lawfully, morally, or correctly. So my advice to you is mitigate your risk reputationally and financially, be mature and responsible, and choose approved suppliers, and get copies of their GDPR policy and route map, their insurances, benchmark them against other people to make sure that you have got the right investigator in place, and get specific references of proven skills and capabilities. You can go and look on websites of investigators, and it will say brilliant investigation done, and it will be signed Bob from Marlow. What a brilliant team, signed Jane from London. Look for ones that are going to have given names of individuals, normally solicitors, So you'll have a solicitor there that has acted as a referee, and then you've at least getting some reassurance that these are a bona fide investigator. And keep these files in your library because, as you'll see from the case studies that we go through, investigations move really quickly. So if you can hold that data ready for when you need to do an investigation, then you're ready to move really quickly. So the legal services that are available, the lawful legal services that are available out there for you as an investigator. And the majority of the times you will have an investigation, you will deal with it yourself, and you will deal with it adequately, and you will get resolution for the issue. Alternatively, you will go to your employment solicitor, your litigation solicitor, and they will take you through a process, and you will get to the resolution again without having to use an external investigative capabilities. But the lawful facilities and resources that are available are, for example, forensics. You might need something forensically examined, so a document for a handwriting comparison, something that is found within the workplace when you've done a check on somebody. Is it drugs, for example? So forensics can be used in an awful lot of ways. And also we have computer data forensics. Now, computer data forensics is the lawful retrieval of data in accordance with the civil procedure rules from a device. So that can be a desktop, laptop, palm top, a printer, sat nav, mobile phone. And if you do think that there is information on there, my advice to you is don't play with it. Don't look at it. Just turn the device off and speak to an expert and let the expert guide you through the continuity of that evidence, because this is a starting point of preserving the continuity of that evidence. Now, you, with the best will in the world, will probably ask your IT to look for the information that you are looking for. There is every chance, not saying happens in every case, but there is every chance that that evidence can then become contaminated and corrupted negligently and accidentally because somebody is looking for something, and it breaks down that evidential chain, which may then potentially give a defense and an alibi to the individual that you are investigating when this is disclosed. The equipment that we have got and the software that we use, you will not readily hold. It's expensive software. You won't be using it unless you're doing data retrieval. So the advice is turn the device off, get expert help from there, and we can look there for all sorts of things, for evidence that has been deleted, information that has been sent out, or documents that have been changed. And these are things that we regularly have to do, specifically when we're looking at issues of theft of data from an organization, particularly on breach of contract, when they've gone to set their own business up. Surveillance. Surveillance falls into two categories, and that is conventional surveillance and technical surveillance. So conventional surveillance is where you have a surveillance team that follow an individual or, for example, stolen goods, and that team can adapt and unfold to whatever is happening in front of them. So if you're following a subject who's off long-term sick and they come out of the house and they get on a bus, the team can get on the bus with them. If you're following somebody, has happened to us many, many years ago, came out of London, it was a theft of data, and he came out of London, he got onto the train, the team jumped onto the train with him, he got off in Edinburgh, got into a taxi, the team got behind him in the next taxi, uttered those immortal words, follow that car, and this individual went to a hotel in the centre of Edinburgh. The team jumped out and they covertly gathered the evidence for the meeting that the individual had. So that surveillance team can adapt and unfold to what's happening in front of them. Now, our surveillance team, and I must say here at this point, while this is an association model across the country, we don't subcontract our work. So wherever the work is, it is us that go to do that investigation. So we know that it's done lawfully and correctly. But our surveillance team all carry covert cameras, and this is the bit where it gets a bit James Bond. It's not quite so good for webinars, but here goes anyway. So all of our team will carry car key fobs. So this here is a car key fob, and there's a covert camera in it. And just to show you that there are some USBs in the back. So the team all will carry these. So when that individual jumps out of the car and goes into a hotel reception, the team can put this down on a desk and they can covertly be recording. Individual could be stood over here, and it's not a case of pointing. It's a case of standing there, arms folded, minding your own business, and you're filming the activity that is going on. All of the team wear covert cameras in watches. So in here, in the 6, is a covert camera. And I say this is, the bit where everybody thinks this is James Bond and Q branch. These are nothing more than tools to do the job, the tools to gather primary evidence, evidence that can't be refuted. So this one here is used when your arm is at right angles. So you'd be here, and if I was, and I have done this in the past, where I've been sitting as a prospective customer and I'm looking at somebody's computer screen that is showing me information that is stolen and passing off that it's his own. I've just been sat there, arms folded, recording the computer screen. We're getting that primary evidence. The team all carry, the girls, that they carry either a handbag or a rucksack with a covert camera in. The guys carry either a briefcase, laptop bag, or a rucksack with a covert camera in. And the covert cameras are also built into the headrests of our vehicles, into the wing mirrors and the parcel shelf. So this isn't a case of somebody with a camcorder picking it up and trying to film the evidence and ending up with a compromise because somebody sees a camera being held up to them. So it's all about gathering that primary evidence. We also use technical surveillance, and when I was in the police service in the intelligence, we could follow, as they do nowadays, people by their mobile phones, by their credit cards, via a multitude of technical devices. In the commercial world, the only thing that we really have that we are allowed to use, and this is lawful use, this here is a covert tracking device, and it's magnetized, so you can just magnetize it on. So underneath the car, 3 o'clock in the morning, bang, that is magnetized on. And that will give us real-time movement of that vehicle. We can geofence an area, so we know when it's gone into an area. We can put a device to sleep. We can have alerts for it. So if the vehicle goes to an airport, is parked up, and the individual flies out the country, as soon as that individual sits back in the car will rock, it will reactivate, and we're getting real-time information from there. Really great pieces of kit for not only supporting the surveillance team, but giving an evidential or an intelligence footprint in order to show that the information that you have got is viable, whereas you may then go to deploy a conventional surveillance team. They are absolutely lawful, and I have given evidence of use of these in civil court, magistrates court, and in Crown Court as well. We also use undercover officers, and this is where we insert them into a business with a cover story. The longest we've done was January the 2nd to August the 30th within 1 year, which resulted in us giving evidence in a tribunal. And we build a cover story, the individual goes in, gathers the evidence, feeds it out on a daily basis to us, and we manage that and we give that information to you. And they're they are expensive operations, but they're really, really valuable for trying to find the information that you need from something that might be going on within your organization. We also do debugging. We don't bug, we debug. And this is where we go in and we look for devices that have been placed within an organization. And bugs are so cheap to buy. Once you've got a power supply to them, they are there indefinitely. You haven't got to recharge them, and you can literally buy them and have them in a 4-way adapter. And you plug them into the wall with all of the other plugs plugged in there, and you dial in, and you've just got continual access to what is being said within that location. We also do security views within businesses to look at their vulnerability, look at the vulnerability and take their risk from being this big to something that is really small. And I'm starting one on Monday in a power company. That one is a big one. That'll take about 2 weeks, but invariably a couple of days we can look at what the risk is within a business, not only to the theft and the fraud and the elements of dishonesty within your organization, but also protection from those criminals outside that will potentially break into your organization. And then under the banner of general investigations, this is a couple of our detectives that will go in, look at the nature of the allegation, and follow that investigative chain all of the way through. It could be an allegation about anything. It could be harassment in the workplace. It could be something like procurement fraud, but they will look, and using their police experience, gather, preserve, and present that evidence, following that chain of evidence all of the way through, to be able to then package that up for you to deal with your issue then either via a criminal route or via a civil route. So they are the main lawful services that we supply. We don't supply any unlawful ones, but they are the lawful resources that are available there to be used within the commercial and the legal sector. So I'm just going to give you a couple of case studies, and then I'm just going to show you a video of one operation. Now, Operation Ormskirk was based around theft of data, theft of data, theft of IP. So it was in a renewable industry sector, and the individual had left the business, and there was a suspicion that they had started up their own business in breach of that contract. So we were tasked with placing the individual under surveillance and gathering evidence of the movements and the associations. So the investigation started, and we quickly identified a location where the individual had set up his new factory unit. And actually, at the time, he was still in the process of adapting the factory unit for his own purposes. It was only a small one. And also during the surveillance, we saw him going out, and he was at our clients' locations, and he was installing some renewable devices, and he was actually using our clients' employees, 2 of them that were off long-term sick, who were now working for him. And they were also using our clients' civil contractors as well. So all of this was in breach of that contract. So while we were having a daily discussions as the surveillance was going on with the clients, we decided that we would try and, in effect, gain access lawfully to the factory unit to see if we could see what was happening in there. So wearing a fluorescent jacket, carrying a parcel with a different address on, car key fob, one of our surveillance officers walks just into the doors of the factory unit, covertly recording, and he's met by the subject that we're following, and he's basically saying, "Excuse me, mate, I'm looking for this address." And he filmed there on the desk inside the door a laptop, an iPad, and a mobile phone. That information was gathered and secured. It was sent down to the lawyers that evening, and then the lawyers went into court to go and get a search and seizure order for those devices, for the laptop, the iPad, and the mobile phone. So then a couple of days later, they came up to the location. We did the search and seizure order, and we seized those devices. As I say, in accordance with civil procedure rules, we've seized those devices. We then looked for evidence, and we found out that he was clearly breached his contract. He had stolen data, and therefore then he was injuncted, and there were cost orders against him. So that there, we've got 2 elements of the investigative capabilities coming into one investigation: the computer forensics and the surveillance. In Operation Measham, and this will make sense to a lot of you that have come through webinars 1, 2, and 3, we're looking about the opportunity of how people commit crime. In Operation Measham, this organisation wrote 1,500 checks per month, and they were handwritten. So this individual's job was to handwrite checks for refunds that were due to customers. Those refunds could be anything from £7 to £1,700. She would write those checks. They would then go with the paperwork to her supervisor that would sign the checks. They would come back to her. She would post them out, and then her job was to reconcile that those checks had been cashed. If they hadn't been cashed, then she was to rewrite them and send them out again. What she realised was actually there was an awful lot that were coming back that were never cashed. So she decided to get herself one of these ballpoint pens where you can rub the ink out. So she would write the check to the payee. It would go to her supervisor, who would sign it, and it would come back. She would rub out the payee name, and she either put her name, her partner's name, or her daughter's name. And doing that, she stole £140,000, and it was only identified once she was left. We then sent in two of our colleagues this is the general investigations, that looked at the nature of the allegation and then followed the evidential chain through, and we were able to prove what she'd done. We were also then able to prove as well that her and her husband had set up an exclusive chip shop takeaway in the Midlands, and they'd used the money from there in order to fund that. And we also proved that he had been a habitual fraudster under a different name up in Leeds. So all of that was able to be packaged together, allowing the criminal conviction to take place. I'll skip down one here. Operation Perry is a huge drugs issue that was within a commercial environment. Now, you probably think, well, how can you have a commercial drugs enterprise going on within a commercial business environment? Employees will find the opportunity for what they want to do, and they'll rationalize their actions. And quite often you'll find that employees are involved with individuals outside the organization with a lot more criminal experience. In this location, it was a huge, almost concrete bunker. And nobody ever went in there. It was at the bottom of a really long yard and a huge area. And there's a power supply in there, and a couple of the employees, along with somebody externally from criminal organised crime group, had set up a cannabis crop in there. And it was huge. It was bigger than any I'd seen in the police service. And they'd set up the irrigation system, they'd set up the power system, and they were growing the cannabis plants in there. Because of the nature of the organisation, there was no spike in power, so nothing was picked up there, and nobody ever went down to this location. So after a period of time, somebody stumbled across this. They gave some information to one of the managers. We set up observations there to show who was going in and out of there, the employees that were going in and out of there, which was all lawfully recorded. The information was given to the police. But prior to that, we'd also gone to their lockers during the night when they'd taken their work clothes off and hung them up in their lockers, and we'd taken swabs as well in each individual locker, and then we'd had those swabs examined to prove that it was cannabis resin. So we were trying to do as much as the work for the police as we could, because we do tend to find that the more evidence you give the police, the more responsive they are in taking the investigation off us or off you as a client and progressing it forward. And in Operation Evesham, which is one that's been mentioned throughout the webinars, a lady called Wendy Dillingham worked for a small business, turned over £1.2 million a year, 12 employees. She managed to steal £400,000 out of that business by siphoning money out. And she was in charge of the accounts. And each month she would open them up with a 2-tier authentication code from the bank. And she would change the accounts. She would open them up and she would cut and paste them from the statements, and she would put them into Word, and she would change the figures to reconcile with what she had stolen. And we proved there that in a couple of years she had stolen £400,000, well, £360,000 from the business, although she was ultimately charged with £400,000 worth of fraud. And she literally identified how to do that. That investigation took us 3 days, and that was taking statements of evidence. Wendy Dillingham had disappeared and done a runner, taking statements of evidence and doing a computer forensic investigation. So we gathered that evidence, we'd secured it, and then we presented it to the police. There's a whole nother story as to why it took the police 6 months to arrest her, but she was eventually arrested and she went to jail for 5 years. And she committed that offence while the MD was away from the business, hadn't got his eye on the ball within the business, looking after his wife who had got cancer. And she had identified that that was her opportunity. When she did get sent to jail, she was sent to jail for 4 years, and she also had to repay £400,000 back under the Proceeds of Crime Act. Now I'm going to show you a quick video, and this is based around a false absenteeism, and I'll quickly talk you through it. So this individual here, he's off long-term sick, he's got a bad back, claims he can't come to work, can't get out of bed, can't come in for welfare visits, and here he is. The surveillance has brought him to an address where he's doing some building renovation. Quite clearly there's nothing wrong with him. He's driving a digger, he's jumped off the digger, he's walking around, and yet this is the individual that has been off long-term sick for an awful long time and getting paid full pay, and he's just using all of that time to do what he wants. And this is lawfully gathered footage from one of our headrest cameras. And here he is, quite clearly nothing wrong with him. He's digging, building the house, and what we've got here is he's facially identified. This is him doing what he says he can't do. So what potential defence can he have when he is challenged with this evidence? There is a way to challenge people with this evidence, do it bit by bit by bit, but quite clearly here, the investment in time and money by the client puts them in the strongest position that they have proved this civil issue absolutely beyond reasonable doubt. So is everything that we do lawful? Absolutely, and we'll stand behind it in any legal forum whatsoever. Here's a couple of the cases that we've been involved with that have ended with people being convicted in jail. Woman here, jail for £2.3 million. Bosses in a fraud factory there, that was £7.5 million. And then Wendy Dillingham It says there embezzled 267,000. It was actually, she was charged with £400,000. And, you know, you want to look and think what a criminal looks like? Well, that's one. One of your employees, somebody who you never probably would have thought would be dishonest. So we're here to provide to you high quality, cost effective service. Every kind of investigation that we do, whilst a surveillance operation is a surveillance operation and a forensics examination is a forensics examination, there are particular peculiarities, and we have a few sayings, one of which is that ground dictates, i.e. where are we going and how are we going to do it? Are we coming in to do a forensic examination in the middle of the night because there are employees in? Are we doing the surveillance conventionally, or are we doing it technically first of all? So everything is tailored to a client's individual needs, and that's why we look to build those long-term relationships, so you can feel comfortable picking the phone up, speaking to us about the issue that you've got, and we can advise you. The usual thing we get is, look, we need 24-hour surveillance 7 days a week. No, you don't. You can drill that down, and you probably need 3 days surveillance, 6 a.m. until 6 p.m. And we can take you through that whole process from start to finish. What I always say is, you know, please do connect on LinkedIn with us, because we put a lot of information out there that you will find useful, especially with regards to current fraud trends that are out and about. Speak with your colleagues. This is all about an education, because this subject is not on a boardroom agenda, and it should, because the impact financially can be really quite high, as well as reputationally. And I always would like people to book one of our senior management workshops, where we go through this workbook, because what it's going to do is it's going to start to make you think and understand what your risks are and how you can deal with these issues. So we've gone through 4 webinars. That is the workshop. So it's understanding and making people at the top of the organization and a decision maker, so that we can get an understanding that this is a reality in a business, understanding why employees will be dishonest, what's the risk, how can you prevent it, and if needs be, how you can lawfully detect it, and build a strong relationship with us. For those of you that have joined today, I really hope that was useful, and by all means get in touch for the previous webinars that I can send out to you. And those of you that have been through the others, I really do hope that the 4 have pieced together just to give you an insight into the reality of, unfortunately, the world that I and my team have to deal with unfortunately, an element of dishonesty by employees within organizations. I'm here. Should anybody need to speak to me, by all means, just pick the phone up to me, and hope everything goes well, and take care as we come out at the end of the pandemic. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.